everyone, today I'm going to be discussing the current news surrounding Russia and Belarus's participation in the 2024 Paris Olympic Games. It seems like I need to make a playlist of videos on Russia as I have a number of videos for various different controversies and scandals they have been a part of. So I'll be tagging them throughout this video for more context as to things that I might mention, but I'm going to be covering more of the recent developments and reactions to this whole upcoming Olympic Games post unnecessary invasion. So let's get started. So I'm firstly going to do just a quick review of the general stuff that has been happening with Russia in the Olympic Games for the past almost decade and what that looks like now. So I'm also going to make a note for all the times that I'm saying Russia, particularly post-Ukrainian invasion. You can also include Belarus in that, as Belarus has allowed Russia to use their land as a staging post for their invasion of Ukraine. So a lot of the stuff I'll be talking about also includes them as well. However, if I'm constantly having to say Russia and Belarus, I'm going to get tongue-tied and make up a whole brand new Eastern European country that no one knows of. So I'm going to stick with just saying Russia. Anyways, going back. Russian athletes have avoided being outright banned from the past 4 Olympic Games, dating back to around 2016, when their state-sponsored doping system was discovered. At the past 3 Olympic Games, they competed without any national symbols or their national anthem, but were called the Olympic athletes of Russia, and still had like tracksuits that were very much like, this is the Russian flag, which still very much says they're Russian, but they're not competing as Russia, but as Olympic athletes. It's a little confusing. So the first time this occurred was at the 2018 Pyeongchang Winter Olympics, and the IOC kept this up for the 2021 Tokyo Summer Games and the 2022 Beijing Winter Olympics, which ended in February 2022. So 4 days after the Beijing Winter Olympics ended, Russia, I will add at the behest of China as to avoid not ruining their closing ceremonies, invaded Ukraine without reason. The IOC then, with a heavy heart, shortly before the Winter Paralympics, requested sporting organizations to ban Russian athletes from competing at the Paralympic Games. A complete ban could not be instituted due to the timing of the event. So some athletes were already in Beijing at the time, and to tell them that they can't compete, well, the IOC wasn't going to do that. So this was in an effort to condemn Russia's actions and was needed to protect the integrity of global sports competitions and for the safety of all participants, the IOC stated. This was almost exactly a year ago, with the Russian invasion of Ukraine occurring on February 24th, 2022. However, with the Paris Olympic Games coming up in 2024, the IOC had kind of changed what it had said about Russia's participation, now stating that it's totally up to the sporting federations to decide whether or not they can join, after telling them to ban them only a year earlier. The IOC is also actively supporting Russian athletes to help them qualify for the Paris 24 Games, and not to mention shooting down pretty much any country that raises concerns or threatens boycotts or voices opinions about Russia's participation in the Olympic Games. So immediately post-invasion, the IOC was urging a ban on the athletes. Now, as time has passed, they are kind of doing the opposite. So who is saying what? I'm going to be covering reactions from the international community, in particular France, who will be hosting the games, and what the IOC is kind of saying about all of this criticism. So we're going to start with the international community. Now, this is mostly following a virtual sports council that was held with 36 nations on the 18th, where the issue of Russia's participation was the kind of main talking point. So countries in attendance included the US, Germany, Australia, Britain, the United States, a lot of the Nordic countries, the Baltic states, and Poland. Ukrainian President Zelensky did participate in the summit and spoke to the others present, stating that Russian athletes have no place in Paris while the invasion of Ukraine continues. Many nations allied with Ukraine supported his comments. Nations such as Denmark, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, and obviously Ukraine stated that they were willing to boycott the Olympics if nothing was going to be done. Out of the 36 countries there, many had very similar feelings and comments as to what to do about Russia at these games. So the major outcome from this event was to question the IOC on the lack of clarity in the term neutral athlete, which the IOC has been stating Russian athletes will be categorized as while participating at the Olympics. And many of these countries want to know how the term of a neutral athlete will be applied effectively in cases for Russian athletes. And the IOC have yet to comment on this. So more specifically, in France, where the games are going to be held, the French government has not ruled out a potential sanction against Russia at the Paris Olympics, stated from a spokesperson. So far, no official decision has been made with the IOC, but you know that France has been consistently in favor of fully and completely applying any sanctions against Russia. Even the mayor of Paris, Anne Hidalgo, has stated that Russian athletes should be banned from the city itself. The Paris Olympic Committee stated that participation in the games isn't up to politicians to decide, but a matter of the IOC and international sports federations to decide. However, the IOC does not have any ability to interfere with national laws and bans against a nation or sanctions. So if France decided that no Russian nationals were allowed to cross their borders, the IOC can't really do anything about that. So what is the IOC saying to all of this criticism? I'm going to go over a couple of points of contention that have popped up. So the first thing I'm going to discuss is the involvement of the UN in this decision. The IOC president Thomas Bach has insisted that sports has to respect the rights of all athletes and denied the organization is on the wrong side of history by not banning Russia and aiding its athletes to the Paris 2024 Games. Now, the IOC states that it has taken advice from the UN in regards to human rights violations. The UN said that banning athletes based on their passports is discrimination. Now, historically, the IOC has issued bans on nations from attending the games, which usually involves, they're not invited to the Olympics or their National Olympic Committee is disbanded or not allowed to participate. So in 1948, Germany and Japan were not invited due to their actions in World War II. In 1964, South Africa was banned due to its apartheid laws, and this ban lasted until 1988. Now, these bans were upheld by the IOC because the UN had issued sanctions against the nations, the IOC stated, when compared to this current situation. However, it's very important to acknowledge that Russia is on the UN Security Council and can basically veto anything they want. When an action was put forth by Albania in the US in the UN Security Council to call for Russia to immediately stop on its attack in Ukraine, it was able to veto it, and thus no action needed to be taken. With their power in the UN, Russia can basically kind of do whatever they want, so no sanctions or anything are going to be published by the UN against Russia, which is a really big point the IOC seems to glaze over in this statement when using this as an excuse. What has been highly condemned is their direct assistance in aiding Russian athletes to compete in events in Asia to qualify for the Olympic Games. So qualification paths are being sought in Asia to avoid security issues and potential hostility from some competitors competing in Europe. So this support is only for Russian and Belarusian athletes who have not actively supported the war or opposed the war, and they will qualify as neutral athletes at the Games. However, the idea that Russian athletes will denounce their government in order to compete at the Games is a long shot, unless they're being told by the Russian government to do so, knowing that they don't actually. So Russia has a long history of punishing, executing, poisoning, and detaining those who dissent against the government. Not many Russian athletes will probably put themselves at risk due to the repercussions they may face in their personal lives, including their families as well. Another point the IOC seems to glaze over and ignore. The IOC have also reiterated other nations who are threatening to boycott with a statement to CNN. Threatening a boycott of the Olympic Games goes against the fundamentals of the Olympic movement and the principles it stands for. A boycott is a violation of the Olympic Charter, which obliges all national Olympic committees to participate in the Games of the Olympiad by sending athletes. As history has shown, previous boycotts did not achieve their political ends and served only to punish the athletes of the boycotting nations. This comment, again, has obviously received wide criticism from many nations because there is an active war happening whereas previous boycotts like in 1984, 1980, where it was a Cold War. I'll give it that, it was a war, but it was a Cold War. So much of the IOC's reaction to the outcry and criticism have been to discuss what the true heart and the soul of the Olympic Games are. From a member of the IOC Paris Committee, history will show who is doing more for peace, the ones who try to keep lines open, to communicate, or the ones who want to isolate and divide. IOC president has also stated, "We have shown this in the past with great success in the Olympic movement." Then using examples of North and South Korea, Israel and Palestine, and Kosovo, that the role of the Olympics is to bring people together. What is also being ignored in this statement is the overall power of Russia internationally, not just within sports, but also politically. Countries such as Palestine, Israel, North and South Korea do not have the same kind of power that Russia holds internationally, politically, or sport-wise. Missing out on Israel's participation at an Olympic Games is not going to be hugely impactful like missing out on Russia's participation. If you just look at the 1980-1984 boycotts, and you can see how dramatically different those games were with and without America and the USSR's participation. So the IOC has spoken in support of Ukrainian athletes, stating, "We can, from a human point of view, understand the reactions. We share their suffering. Every Ukrainian athlete can be rest assured that we are standing in full solidarity with them and that their comments are taken very, very seriously into consideration." They have also created a fund to specifically support Ukrainian athletes for their training, travel to Paris, etc. So this kind of assistance kind of comes backhanded when they're also assisting Russian athletes to do something very similar, but saying, you know, we understand your situation and, you know, we feel for you. It's kind of like that whole thoughts and prayers thing. Just saying. So in conclusion to all of this, it really doesn't look like the IOC is actually going to do anything about this issue. Considering that they haven't done anything to stand up against Russia after their state-sponsored doping scandal broke 8 years ago, if they've not done anything by now to punish Russia, they aren't going to be doing anything else. They will continue to make excuses for allowing them to still compete at the Games, even though they have tarnished the IOC's sacred rules about peace and clean sport for nearly 10 years now. Overall, the IOC just seems to ignore a lot of external factors as to why they are not placing a ban on Russian athletes, as stated earlier. However, going back to that sporting conference, as part of his address, President Zelensky also stated that 228 Ukrainian athletes and coaches who have fought for their country have died since the start of the invasion. He stated that if there's an Olympic sport with killing and missile strikes, you know which national team will take first place. So I think what's far more important for the IOC to acknowledge is that its athletes, the whole reason the Games exist, are dying. Ukrainian and Russian Olympians are dying in an unnecessary invasion, and you would think that they would want to take a stance against unnecessary deaths of these people. So thank you very much for watching this video. I'll link other videos on Russia below if interested. I'll be keeping an eye on this as a news item and make another video if new stuff comes out, which I'm sure it will. There will be more and more and more drama around this one. I'm hoping to get back to my regular schedule of a video every second Thursday, so stay tuned for another one. Thank you again for sticking around. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you soon. Bye!